that Russia and China will pay a price.
We need to make the Iranians pay a price in Syria. We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing I would do...
We make them pay the price by killing Russians?
Yes.
The only way the United States can have any effect in this region and turn the tide is to start killing Russians.
If every nation represented here directly and urgently makes it clear that Russia and China will pay a price because they are holding up progress, blockading it, that is no longer tolerable.
Because once you peel back the layers, Hillary Clinton is not just a mere wolf in sheep's clothing. She's an unabashed hawk, through and through.
Bashar Assad's conduct of the war, barrel bombs, chemical weapons, slaughtering women and children, not only killed 250,000 people, it's what gave rise to ISIL to start with, and it's what fuels them still.
It is that we will support the Syrian people and that we will support the political process that results in him leaving, or we will continue to support the Syrian opposition in order to remove him by force. But as I said earlier, he will be removed.
I am confident that Assad's days are numbered.
The world will not waver. Assad must go.
We both agree that Assad needs to go.
Here are the facts. In 2011, the attempt to overthrow Bashar al-Assad by force began. At the time, ISIS did not exist in Syria. ISIS did not begin to emerge until the United States, the Saudis, Qatar, Jordan, and Israel began supplying weapons to so-called moderate rebels, also known as the Free Syrian Army. But if you want to understand what really happened in Syria, you have to go back to 2009. Because in 2009, Syrian President Assad was offered a deal. The nation of Qatar wanted to run a natural gas pipeline through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and onto Turkey with a view to supply European markets. The plan was public record, but Assad turned that deal down. Instead, in 2012, he publicly signed a deal with Iran for a pipeline that would run from Iran through Iraq and ultimately through Syria. By making that deal with Iran, Assad sealed his fate. The Saudis and Qatar began funneling money to extremist groups in order to overthrow Assad's regime. It was all over oil and natural gas, not the oppression of Sunni Muslims. By 2013, those moderate rebels, as they were called, being trained by the U.S. and the Saudis and coalition forces, they began to defect and join al-Qaeda in Syria, known as al-Nusra, and a lesser-known group called ISIS.
But as you can see, Plan A starts over here in Qatar, goes through Saudi Arabia, so we're good so far, and it would be okay to make it to Turkey if it weren't for Syria. So this, of course, is where the problem comes in.
Russia and the United States should be best friends because we face the same ultimate enemies of a radical Islamic movement that would murder our own people.
Do you still think you're in an evil empire, Mr. President?
No.
Why we find ourselves standing like this?
Together, the two leaders had seized their chance.
And in a sign that the Cold War really was drawing to a close, Reagan and Gorbachev walked together in Moscow's Red Square. It had been 5 years since the president had called the Soviet Union an evil empire. Things had changed.
I was talking about another time, another era.
It is therefore our intention to challenge the Soviet Union, not to an arms race, but to a peace race.
Man of peace who tried to get the American people to see our Cold War enemies not as despicable, inhuman monsters, but as people like us.
No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. But we can still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science and space, in economic and industrial growth, in culture, in acts of courage. Our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal.